come to Australia and you arrive by plane, you've obviously already got a visa of some sort to get to that far. And if you step across and get through immigration controls and you say, I now want to seek an asylum, the whole process comes into place for you. But if you arrive by boat because you haven't got your papers, because you fled, all sorts of things, you're treated like a criminal.
When we invite people to participate in crossing borders a slow walk, we invite them to have an experience of migrating through time and space and the borders and boundaries that they need to cross to do that. These might be internal or external boundaries, and they might be physical, emotional, psychological, social, psychic boundaries.
Susie.
Noora and I belong to an organisation called Group Relations Australia, which is a professional association. People who are very interested in what goes on in groups, what goes on in organisations, what goes on in communities, what goes on in society, and both sort of what goes on the surface, but what's underneath the surface that drives behaviours and attitudes and beliefs about people in groups and what they do. This association was very interested in using the theories and concepts that we work with, which tends to be psychoanalytic and psychodynamic and sociological, to explore what seeking asylum means, the experience and the meaning of it in Australia.
Did the walk in July, and coming back into the spiral I found really powerful. I got in touch with a sense of being in relation to other people as opposed to just being me in my body, where in the whole walk it felt very individual. And somehow I was suddenly connected to all these people.
Remember from the walk was just watching the person's feet in front of me. We were not interacting with people around us, but there was certainly a relationship to the people around us. And I guess another aspect that I was aware of, especially with respect to people around, was feeling vulnerable. And obviously it doesn't compare at all to actual refugees. Immigrants having to follow a smuggler, like a human trafficking smuggler who's loads you onto a boat, and you're subject to wherever they take you. And even if you see the boat is too dangerously overcrowded, you're in it for the long haul, for better and often for worse.
Thinking about being on the periphery, or being, because we skirted the edges of things quite a lot, and I feel like when you're in the line, you're looking out to where other people are participating in life, and you're kind of removed from that, and you're on the edges or on the fringe of all of those things. I was really aware of the spectacle and the kind of visual of it, and how beautiful it was to watch. As almost a kind of dance or performance. I think I was really conscious of that, and conscious of shadows and the aesthetics of how it appeared. Whereas as soon as I was part of it, I was very surprised by that kind of physical, the difficulty and the relationship you have, even though we're not talking with the other people in the line, the relationship that you build with them because you're following their step. The physicality of making a journey. I think I've become more conscious of that, and the actual, not so much somebody migrating, on a plane but that physical journey on foot and carrying, bearing a load, taking people with you or not being able to. I think I'm really more conscious of those physical journeys.
I was doing the walk, I got more and more in touch with a sense of crossing borders and walking and not knowing where I was going and not knowing where you were leading me and not knowing when it would end and not knowing if I would have the energy to carry on, and not knowing anything about my future in that setting. Because I got into being this older woman who was just walking and not knowing, it was unlimited. There were no boundaries. I could not see where the next boundary was. I didn't know how long I would have to walk to get to the next boundary. It reminds me of crossing the border between Greece, northern Greece and Turkey, many, many years ago. And I was hitchhiking, and we got to what looked like a little purple line on the map and was dumped on the Greek side of the border. And the walk across to Turkey must have been about 5 kilometres. And so this tiny little thin line on the map was actually a huge walk in the dark. So I remembered that in terms of not knowing where the next border would be. You didn't know, it was in the dark, you couldn't see, there were no signposts. You just had to keep trudging on, walking and walking and walking. It was to make people aware of other people who were walking slowly across the world to find a home.
Charged down the freeway on a motorcycle to get there. I got there late, just as they were taking off. So my whole body was racing, and then suddenly I have to move slowly, like through treacle. We're doing this to challenge our fellow citizens to be mindful, but we're also doing it for ourselves. And and to that extent, it was a really great piece of meditation, meditative movement, very conscious movements really, and yet on the other side of it, that consciousness about your body and trying to make it conform to this stride and movement also freed the mind up to just be contemplating the whole business of borders and needing to cross them. But what about us as a bunch? In a sense, we had a border around ourselves. Groups do, don't they? We became a group that became mindful of itself, and we were looking out for ourselves, for each other as a group, us and them. That happened very quickly, I felt, the us and them.
And I was quite surprised by how much it evoked. So the very first thought I had when I reflected on it was of standing in line at passport control and what that was like, waiting to be let in, or of course the possibility of being kept out. Walking slowly introduces an aspect of restraint and constraint. You can only go as fast as the person in front of you, and so you are locked in the motion of the group as it travels on. And actually there was some physical pain for me in doing that too, because I think that it's quite tiring and it becomes quite painful. And that made me also think about those who are refugees and travelling from one land or one, trying to cross a boundary and being on a very long journey. The physical toll on people doing that journey, and what it's like for those who are less physically able, but because maybe they're elderly or because they're very young. And again, unconsciously, it's all too easy to not appreciate the physical difficulties for people in making some of those journeys. So I think overall, it was quite a somber experience. But it's still one that's very alive for me. I felt very quiet after it.